Hello everyone, welcome to Lush and Salty Aquariums. My name is Stefan. Thanks for coming to my channel. Okay, I'm standing back of the 135 gallon freshwater display tank in my dining room in the fabulous city of Chicago, where today I woke up to the season's first snow. That's the iconic Lakeshore Drive, just outside of my apartment. Kind of cool. It has a lovely sort of swooshing sound from time to time, only made more evident by the sleet and slush on the roadways. So it's a nice day to be cozy and inside and play around with your fish world, which is what I'm doing. I wanted to feature this tank because yesterday I gave it a significant cleaning while I was doing the once a week water change, and so it's showing pretty crystal and lovely right now. I wanted to take advantage of that and highlight this fish tank for you right here, right now, so that's what we're gonna do. I made some changes there, and I want to talk about those because maybe they're the sort of minor hacks that you could employ in your fish world to make an aquarium or your fish room kind of cooler and better. Maybe something of what I'm about to say can help you in that regard. The first thing is, and I'll get to all these lovely creatures. I mean, I talk about them and the plants at length all the time in my videos, so I don't want to necessarily fall into the trap where I just start doing that and forget about the original reason I came to this fish tank. And the reason why I'm focusing on this piece of driftwood right here is it's a not random, but a addition. Now that piece of driftwood was never part of this island aquascape, but what happened was this beautiful sword plant, which creates that terrific V that in turn creates a wonderful focal point for the center of the aquarium. It's over time, it has somewhat emerged from the substrate and occupied the center of the driftwood island display, and it created sort of a chasm right where behind the angelfish's tail at the base of that piece of driftwood. And in that chasm, granted, a lot of Plecostomus and other denizens of the aquarium would use the network of caves and nooks and crannies to do everything, to call it home, to spawn. I've got baby plecos. I know they made their babies in there because I don't use pleco caves, don't even try to actively breed anything in this tank. But over time, that chasm there just in front of the sword plant, especially as I cut dead leaves and you see the cut stalk right there, that left sort of a blank and unattractive hole, if you will. And it never quite, I couldn't put a nubius in there or anything because I think it was used as sort of one of the many back doors or front doors into this network of caves and nooks and crannies. But from a eyeline point of view, it looked conspicuous and a little bit, what's the right word, denuded. In other words, like a piece of the landscape where nothing could technically grow. And I wanted to rectify that. And I had an idea, like one of my laying in bed before I fall asleep ideas, that I would wake up in the morning and find a suitable piece of driftwood or some other hardscape, perhaps a rock, and just insert it there in the foreground right before the wonderful flying V shape of that featured sword plant. And I didn't even know if I had a piece of wood that would be suitable, but as fate would have it, the only piece of driftwood I had in my hardscape supply was this piece. And I had been using it in a nanoscape and pulled it over time because it made servicing that nano tank very, very difficult to get around the piece of wood which occupied pretty much the full center back of that aquarium. It looked good, but it made it very impractical to do almost anything when it came to servicing that tiny tank. So I took that piece and thought, could this work? And begging your pardon on that reflection, but and it did. Not only did it work, it almost looks like it's been there forever, which is so super cool. I mean, if you see the two pieces, God, I'm trying to deal with this reflection. If you see those two pieces, although they're not even the same kind of driftwood as this is one kind and this is another. I swear to God, they're very much different. And when they were dry, they looked very much different. But that older piece of driftwood, it fit in there like a glove, almost like kismet. You know, fate was intervening and making my life a whole lot easier. And I find those random bits of inspiration, or let's try this, or maybe that'll work, to be one of the funnest parts of this hobby. You know, to take something you already have that you're not using and have it help you solve not a problem but a conundrum, you know, something that's been sort of vexing you about your particular aquarium. And I thought that was so super cool, right? I mean, I had some other Sirius stone and I could have like tried that, and I did earlier, and it didn't work. You know, it would either topple or it just didn't look right. I mean, and honestly, it's about the aesthetics at this point. I mean, I'm sure my fish, or especially the bottom feeders, would have just preferred I did nothing. And doing nothing was a strategy that I absolutely had been doing. I don't know how you can take action to do nothing, but I would, well, here's how, because every time I saw it, that spot, I'd be like, it's not quite sitting well with me. What could I do? But I never did anything. So I did nothing until I thought, I'm gonna look for a piece of brown driftwood and see if I can't just drop it in. And that's what I did. And it was almost like finding a puzzle piece, you know, under the table or something, and then finishing your puzzle. And that, you know, that's a great metaphor, because that's what I feel like I've accomplished. And it's one of those exciting, but you know, it's mundane for sure, you know, taking something you're not using out of a box and popping it in, and you know, as a jerry rig or jury rig. I never am sure which is the proper use of that term, but it worked like a charm, and it doesn't seem to bother any of the other creatures in this tank. So that was like the first thing I did. The second thing I did was I had a bunch of pogostem and octopus that I had growing in front of those Vallisneria and in between this sort of cryptocorn forest down here. And it was always just kind of jumbling, and I mean, it was alive and it was kind of cool, but in the end, it was an overkill for that spot. And I realized in an epiphany that the whole front part of this aquarium has a symmetry that should, you know, better be left without something tall and obtrusive right there in the front. And so I just pulled all that pogostem and octopus out. I took something out to create a better effect overall, at least in my opinion, to have a nice mid-ground about a quarter to a third of the way up the tank, and then the background primarily of Vallisneria, which looks super cool with those Harlequin rasboras and cardinal tetras just sort of frittering around in between it all. Love that, love those schooling fish in a big giant aquarium, the way they find their territory, make it their own, but they do not feel constrained by it either. Now, I do have this species of hygrophila here. Now, that's just a top that I popped in there. I had cut, when I was doing that trim, all the hygrophila coriumbosa, and there's probably another kind that were but just amassing behind the flying V sword plant, and they were draping over and blocking light and interfering with the floaters that I had. I mean, they were sending out a ton of white roots. So it was time, and I cut the tops. Couldn't bear to throw the tops out. I never liked doing that. And I had no other tank where such a big plant would be appropriate. I just don't have the room for one thing, even for smaller plants. So I put it in there. It violates the credo that I had just established earlier in the video in terms of breaking up that symmetry of the lower level plants. And I fully intend to move it once it gets a little bit bigger, or I can find a suitable place to take that top, especially if it establishes a few roots at the bottom, which it will, and I'll just pull that out and move it more towards the background. You can see its cousin right back there, same plant, all the way in the back, looking very healthy, just below the chin of that pearl gourami, or excuse me, that opaline gourami. And that's what I'll do. So folks, moving around carefully, and that's what when I say keep your hands in the tank, albeit carefully, that's what I mean. I keep my hands in the tank all the time, trying to find improvements like I did with that piece of driftwood, but I'm very careful about it. I was happy I didn't have to use an anchoring rock or string or some sort of glue to wedge that in there. In the event that if it didn't work very well, I could just quietly, expeditiously pull it out, and no harm, no loss, nothing. It was just as it would be before. And it's the same phenomenon I could do with this one lone top of Hygrophila coriambosa. The other thing, I have done is I did take a little piece of this lily that I think it's the Japanese lily. I forget its proper name. It has, name escapes me. Of course, you probably recognize it. Very common plant. And I had some of it, and I placed it into the ground right here, and I was expecting it to grow faster, taller, but I don't care if it doesn't, and I don't care if it doesn't succeed at all. I mean, it looks great right there, but I also enjoy keeping the stage, if you will, I'm calling it a stage, the front of the tank, clean. And it's interesting, a lot of people use sand and white sand, and they have to vacuum or use a magnet to pull up all the stray pieces of aqua soil, which are magnetic. I find that fascinating. Or just clean it in general. I have never had to do that in the almost 3 years I've had this aquarium. I'm lucky. I think the sump and the push from the two outflows on either side are sufficient. Plus, people never realize these big fish, these millennium rainbow fish and the angel fish and the rainbow fish in particular, they're pretty boisterous when they want to be, and their fin movement and their moving about the tank will continuously stir whatever mulm or detritus begins to accumulate, and they, in their own inadvertent way, become part of the housekeeping for your fish tank. Just some food for thought. It's an observation I have. I don't think it's something that can be identified as a fish behavior, but schooling or faster, bigger fish will help you if you have circumstances that allow it. A clean substrate, or at least further in the development of a clean substrate. Clearly, all the plecos and other fish that will utilize the bottom, the Coreodoras, I'm not seeing them, but there's plenty of Adelphi and Sterbai Coreodora in here, and there's plenty of Plecostomus occupying the lower strata of this tank, as well as certain species of fish that just prefer it down there, like my Bolivian rams, wherever they might be. I have a Farawalla catfish right here. He loves that spot. I find him here all the time. I think he and his partner have spawned. I've seen smaller versions of this fish. Sometimes I think I'm hallucinating, like, really, did I see that, or did I put that in? When you have a big tank with a lot of life and you're a crazy old man like I am, you might forget just what the hell the total history of this tank is, which is a cool footnote about YouTube. I mean, technically, if I was really curious, I could go back in time to the setup videos and just watch those, looking at a beautiful adult Sterbai Coreodora. Love the orange highlights that these fish have. So cool. And I'm watching some life there. It's like seeing a leopard in the forest from the clearing. Not even sure what fish that is. Yep, of course, a Plecostomus, a bristlenose. Looks like a female, young adult. Very pretty. Now those have definitely spawned in here. I actually caught a couple of these big classic silver angelfish spawning on that Anubias leaf right there. But when I did the massive cleaning and servicing of this tank, I think it threatened them and they ate all their eggs and they were no longer protecting or being, territorial towards that particular leaf. No, that was one of the parents. Now those eggs never would have amounted to anything in this tank. The parents could only protect them so long. Rainbow fish are just very opportunistic. You see a great male Bosemani there, and then another male, but from a different origin point. That one with the deeper orange but smaller body. Both lovely. It's fun to see the differences, kind of like the differences in our country, southern person versus a northern person. It's not completely apparent, but when you listen to them talk and some of their behaviors, it's just one of the many, many, many awesome things about fish keeping and being an observationist and a naturalist, which I'm not, but I am in a very semi-professional way, just as you all are. You start to notice these things, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. Very much a distraction from the chaos of the people world. Look at these glorious dwarf neon rainbow fish. I tell you folks, that's as good as those fish get, and that's pretty damn good. They are so beautiful and underrated. You don't need to get into super family, super exotic families of rainbow fish. These are readily available and inexpensive, and they keep relatively small as well. But I will say they're 2.5 inches lengthwise and 1.5 inches from top to bottom, if not bigger. I'm misjudging. They're bigger than that. And if I didn't have all these other creatures, they'd likely be spawning too. Pretty easy to spawn. These teacup-sized Millennium rainbows, they look like something a child would draw with the fun little face and the big body. Such a cool fish, and with that deep rust maroon color. I have a trio of them. I think they're all males. I can't be certain, but that's what their body and color type tell me. The classic gold-headed marble angel, you can find these anywhere, but I wouldn't sleep on them. If you see a good specimen with good fins and a nice body, for $8, pretty good looking fish. And of course there's my delightful chubby reticulated Siamese algae eater. When people wonder, do they really get big? Yes, they really get big. And at that size, he could be a problem, but he's not. Or she. She's a gentle giant, and maybe she doesn't do the cleaning like she used to, probably just eating food that I feed the fish on a normal basis. If that fish could talk, it would tell you it's not beautiful, not like all these colorful jewels, but it adds a nice counterpoint, and it is closer in some respects to a pet than any of the others because it has its own personality, and it's and that chubby, slow-moving, kind of happy, gentle giant is heartwarming. Then of course I've got the black mollies, which are extraordinary algae eaters, in the top 5. People don't realize that. I think it's been talked about more and more. Lord knows I talk about it. They are exceptional algae eaters and are often used as such in even saltwater aquariums. And they just go to town. That's their preferred diet, is algae-based, plant-based type foods, although they will eat anything you put in the tank. Those, of course, weren't even supposed to be here in the first place. Talk about happy accidents. They were baby fish I fed in here I put in here from another aquarium to feed my bigger fish. A lot of them did get eaten, but some did not, and you see the result. And I'm pretty happy to have them unless they take over. There's a gold dust molly there and a few of the more straight black, and some have fancy fins and some have standard fins. But I wanted to talk to you about those happy accidents and random bits of inspiration and how you can change things in your aquarium without changing really much of anything. You can affect the integrity of your aquascape and how it appeals to you and how it appeals perhaps to the denizens, the creatures themselves, which, you know, we're in a symbiotic relationship. What's good for the goose needs to be good for the gander. And I don't know, what do you guys think? That stick looked like it's been there forever. I have sort of had a fear that one of the fish would knock it over, but that has not happened yet. And if it does happen, why? I can just pop it back in, you know, and then maybe fate or some plant will help it anchor there permanently, but you know, that may or may not ever happen. It sort of doesn't matter. It does look like it's in there and it's part of the hardscape and part of the ecosystem. And so, you know, that's a win, a W. What do you think? I mean, you can't really compare and contrast it because once you see something in the tank, it almost immediately becomes hard to imagine the tank without it. Sort of one of, I don't know, there's a term for that, you know, like recency bias or something. But I digress and babble, and thank you for spending this time with me. I'd love to hear from you. I promise I'll answer any questions, and I appreciate your comments, your likes, subscriptions, all that good stuff. Super fun to be part of this growing community. As always, folks, keep your, I'm stuttering, so excited. Keep your hands in the tank, albeit carefully, and ciao for now.